Before we get started, I want to thank our community partner, Epilepsy Foundation of America, and sponsors Neurelis and SK Life Science. Thank you so much for believing in this podcast, for making conversations like this possible, and giving us a space to talk about our epilepsy what the F moments. Okay, here we go. Hey guys, welcome to What the F. So today we have a different episode, something that I've never done before, and was actually planning on recording and releasing in 2025. But in light of the tragic death of Riker Earl, a 26-year-old man who was living with epilepsy, it seems that the time for this conversation is now, and has always been now, and should not be something that we hold off. If you're unfamiliar with Riker Earl's story, I've left a link in this episode description for you to check it out. I just want to warn you, it's really tragic and very sad. So today I have two first responders whose spouses also have epilepsy. One of those spouses might be me. And they're going to talk about how having someone in their life very close to them with epilepsy changed their perception of seizures in the field. I also have a certified seizure trainer who's here to talk about what that looks like and how you can get it implemented in your community. If the story of Riker Earl was one that made you feel like we need to do something, there is something awesome happening right now in the epilepsy community. A group is coming together to create a national epilepsy plan. And if that sounds vague and weird, I understand, because that's what I thought too. There will be a huge responsibility from the U.S. government to provide funding, awareness, education, and research for the epilepsy community. If you're like, how do I get involved? What do I do? You can literally do something now. So it's Epilepsy's Action Network has created a whole place for nonprofits, advocates, everyone to come together and push on your officials to make this happen. All you have to do is go to epilepsysactionnetwork.org. The link is in this episode description. Literally, you click on a button and enter your zip code, and it gives you a place to reach out to your officials and say, hey, I need this. We need this epilepsy plan. It takes like 90 seconds. The letter's already written for you. I've done it. Trust me. It's easy peasy, and it makes things happen. I also encourage you to stay in tune with the Epilepsy's Action Network and see what advancements are happening, because right now is very, very crucial to what's going on. If all of this sounds like, oh, right, U.S. government going to help us, truly, there are other national plans for other neurological conditions, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, ALS. All of those neurological disorders have a national plan. Epilepsy is the only common neurological disorder without one in this country. So let's make it happen. Okay, and now we're going to dive into this episode. Thank you all so much for being here.
Hi.
Hi.
Greetings and salutations.
Greetings and salutations. So first, I would like to reintroduce Jessica Chappell, who is with us today as a certified seizure trainer, which we're going to get into what that means and how dope that is. If you recognize Jessica, that's because she's been on this episode or been on this podcast before, and a very popular one. I will also leave the link to that. Jessica, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for bringing me back.
Yeah.
Excited.
Yeah. And then we've got Duane Chappell, who is a safety education officer with the Illinois State Police. And if you notice that they have the same last name, it's because Duane and Jessica are married.
Yay.
Thanks, babe.
No, all right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, Duane. And my last guest is Steve Paluck, who is a firefighter EMT for the Chicago Fire Department and also married to me.
That's my wife.
So I really appreciate you guys all coming in and offering this very unique perspective of being first responders and having spouses living with epilepsy. Before we, get into that, though, I do want to talk about Jessica and Duane and how you guys met and when epilepsy was introduced to your relationship. And you guys are just laughing already, and I cannot wait to hear this story.
Yeah. So this is my favorite story to tell is how Duane and I met. So if you've watched the previous episode, I work at Walgreens, and I was an assistant manager at the time at a store in Gurnee, Illinois. And it was early Sunday morning. I came out of the stock room and I look over to my left and there's a state trooper standing in the first aid section looking at Band-Aids, etc. And I was like, oh, you know what? He's kind of cute. Like, let me go give excellent customer service and go over and see if he needs help. And so I walk over there and I'm like, excuse me, like, do you need help with anything? And I realize his hand is bleeding and he's bleeding on my floor. And I was like, what is happening here? And he's like, yeah, I'm looking for Band-Aids. And I was like, what happened to your hand? And I'm expecting this really awesome story about, some incident that he had to manage. And he goes, I was doing dishes last night and I broke a glass in the sink and I cut my hand and I just busted out laughing, which is not really a laughing matter because he really did hurt himself. But I expected something totally different. And so he started laughing, of course. And then
those dishes needed to get done.
And so we just started talking and like really hit it off. And the next night we actually ended up going out to dinner. We had a great 3-hour date. It was the longest date I've ever been on. And it's just, you mesh with someone and you just connect from like the moment you meet. And the rest is history. And
Wait, she left an important part out. Hold
Which
on.
part did I
I'm
leave
not
out?
just picking up girls at Walgreens. Okay? I'm not on duty.
You just don't walk around in your uniform
I
ladies.
respectfully, since I patrol that area, I left my business card to make sure if she needed anything, and someone needed something the next night called dinner. So I, like she said, we put it all together and we were able to have a nice long conversation that first day. What is it, about 3 hours?
Yeah.
3 hours of just getting to know each other because I had to redeem myself from my little, dish cutting and, try to show, hey, I'm a little bit more of a man than that. So apparently it worked because here we are.
Oh. And so was it on the first date or was it just in the aisle of Walgreens? You're like, by the way, I have epilepsy. Or when did that come up?
No, that was I don't know if that was the first date. That might have been the second or third date where she, obviously I don't go into any extreme details when you're talking to someone, but everyone kind of got their guard up a little bit. So I'm still trying to figure out who this girl is. I mean, have I gone on dates before? Yes. But who is this girl who, kind of got me going, hey, I kind of like you. And then, you're trying to wait on that bomb to drop of what's wrong because you seem a little bit too perfect here, Anyway, but no, I mean, it was kind of one of those things where it was like she was telling about herself, telling about her family, hey, can you pass the salt? Can you pass the ketchup? I have epilepsy. By the way, how's your steak? Wait a minute. What's going on here?
Just like right underneath it.
But, she mentioned it and, I know what epilepsy is, in general, and I know what seizures are in general, and I've experienced it on the job prior to meeting her. But, I guess at that moment, you might deal with a patient or someone on the field on the work duty, but it's not so scary when it's your partner. It's not like, oh my gosh, this is a big deal. No, normal person who's still attractive, still normal, still funny, still enjoy being around. There's nothing to be worried about. And you can still have a wonderful time and a wonderful relationship, with someone with epilepsy. And that's kind of what we share every day.
Yeah, totally. And so you had been on the job because you're in your 19th year,
Yes.
right, with the Illinois State Police, right, which is amazing. But so you'd been on the job for some time, and you had also been on the job for some time before you met me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm curious as to how, once you, like, kind of like the before and after. Like, okay, so I was on the job and encountered seizures, dealt with people, having epilepsy, seizures, etc. But then what shifted? And how did the perception shift after, not just the first date, but then falling in love and being married to like these perfect women?
I would have to say, you deal with it. I mean, there's personal stories I can tell about my first seizure. There's professional stories I can tell about answering those calls. But when you have a person in your life that has epilepsy, that has seizures, it transitions to the job where you develop from rookie of panic mode. Am I doing this right? Am I dealing with this right? To you deal with a few calls and you get comfortable. But when you have a person in your life that's dealing with epilepsy and dealing with seizure, you develop a calm and comfort when dealing with those calls on the job, because it's not just, I've seen this before, I know how to handle this. This is a part of my life too, not just this I don't want to say victim, but this patient. This is a part of my life. all right, I can, when the time is right, I can share, information with you and your family after the situation is currently handled.
This is a typical Tuesday for me.
Yes.
And I'm right now, everybody around me is in panic mode.
Yeah.
But I've done this before. I know how to handle this. I know what to expect from the moment I arrive on scene to the moment, they're packaged up in the ambulance going to the hospital. And like you said, giving information to the family if they need it and want it. So,
and it goes vice versa, because there's a professional aspect of it. Well, I've dealt with enough seizures on the job. I've had that call. I've had those accidents where, I can tell when the time is right. I can tell a story on her first seizure that I was around. I was extra comfortable. Oh yeah. So I got to tell this story.
Yeah, please. I need to hear this.
So it was what was it, Sunday?
Yeah.
It was Sunday morning. We had just we had a party the night before, and everything was right. There was no neglect in her treatment and everything like that. But she wasn't feeling well the next morning, and I went into work for a couple of hours, and I came home and the Bears game was on. And so I'm into the Bears game, and she's upstairs not feeling well. She comes downstairs, lays on the couch adjacent to me, and I'm into the game. It's the second quarter. The game is tight, and she starts having a seizure. And I didn't recognize it at first. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, but the Bears game was on.
No.
3 minutes left in the second quarter. But I mean, obviously,
hang tight. I'll be right there. We're marching down the field.
I knew we had conversations prior to, obviously, at that point. And, I got the medication. I got everything I needed. I slid the coffee table next to her, make sure she was comfortable on her side, make sure there was no danger around her, sat next to her, start watching the game again. What am I going to do? I got to watch it. 2 minutes left in the quarter. But
and I woke up, right? Like I'm coming to, and I'm in my postictal, and I'm like, oh, did I have a seizure? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, what's happening? And he's like, the Bears game is on. And I was like, oh, okay. Like he's like, just relax, you're fine. The Bears are on. And I was like, oh my God.
But hey,
you want some water?
Right.
I had water there already. We're good. But no, we got that. Again, I didn't have to panic like I did when I saw my first seizure. Professionally, I was able to transition to the home where I knew what to do. And this is prior to the additional information I learned through her to make sure she was comfortable, make sure she was on her side, make sure she wasn't going to harm herself. And I was right there next to her. I wasn't like in another room, like, hey, let me know when you're done. No, I was right there next to her.
When you're done.
And I was right there next to her, making sure I can, care for her. I was keeping a timer going, things like that she already gave me cues on, and it all worked out. She got through it.
I got a question for you guys. How was that conversation when you did dive into your epilepsy and explaining it to Duane and like, this is what I need from you?
Yeah.
Sorry, I know
Is this your podcast?
Hey, he's good at this.
I'm just curious because I remember our conversation.
I don't. That's because I have epilepsy. I don't remember shit. So.
Right? No, it's kind of like he said. So it's kind of like my go-to when I explain to people that I have epilepsy. I'm like, I have epilepsy. And before they can even like panic about it or like get into the mode of like, oh my God, are you going to have a seizure right now? I'm always like, I'm well controlled. I'm on medication, haven't had one for like X amount of days. And he's, chill. He's like, okay, I get it. And then, as time goes on, you have to let people know, like, if I do have one, I just keep it simple, right? If I do have one, I've got my pills in my purse or in my bag, and this is where they are. And if something happens, time my seizure, and then as I'm coming out of it and coming to, if I'm okay and I don't go back into one, just give me half, because at the time, I have rescue meds now, like official ones, but at the time it was like, give me half of my seizure medication and it'll help calm my brain down. And so we walked through that. He knew where my meds were, and like it was just that simple. It's like, just make sure. And then when I did have that seizure, he remembered what I had told him, and so he had half a pill, he had the water, and he was there. But it's all about just keeping it simple, keeping it real, and just making sure that the person that you care about and you're spending time with and then getting married with understands like where they have to go, where's your stuff, this is how you support me.
Well, and also, and to tag on to that from my perspective, there was really no cause for concern because, when you're spending more time, more evenings together, more dates together, time throughout the day, she was very mature in her self-care. I saw, she was taking a medication in the morning, so it wasn't like she was reckless at all. And you spend enough time with a person, you see what that is. When she started to slowly fill information in, I mean, it was pretty straightforward to me. There was no, all right, well, this is my role in her epilepsy. And I started to develop that more and more as time, came on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jess, you are very dope at communicating like what your seizure needs could possibly be. We just traveled together and I said it was like a wellness retreat for me because I was learning like how to care for myself from Jess. Cause it was like you're like, okay, so if I have a seizure, this, and you're like, what about you? I'm like, give me a second. Let me remember,
I've got some notes somewhere.
Right. Well, what was that like for you?
It was very similar. I think it was on our second date that, I think we were hanging out on our second date. And she just, kind of, my brain from the EMS side was like, so what do we do here? What do you expect from me? What are your expectations from me? Because you're the one going through it. But what are your expectations from me? When you come out of this, she'd been living alone for quite a bit. And so, now you have somebody around that I kind of want to be around. But so what are your expectations for me? What can I do? How can I help you? And then she started listing them off, and, she had her first seizure, then, her second, and progressed, to eventually, fourth or fifth seizure by the time we were together. And like, by that time I'd just known the routine. Right. I just knew exactly what to do, timing, literally just left her alone, didn't stay by her side, was going to get the ice pack, going to get the water, going to get the Gatorade, the pills, all that stuff, checking the watch, like, she's still in it, okay, all this stuff is ready to go. When she comes out of it, here we go, right to bed, ice pack, medications, all this stuff. I think it just became part of it just became routine. Yep. I hate to say that, but
yeah, me too. It's real fucking annoying. But
it is, but
it's still here.
It's something that's,
Yeah. Okay, so you both had mentioned that, because you now have a loved one in your life, I mean, the most amazing person in your life, living with epilepsy, that like the panic of getting on scene feels like dissipated. What do you think? I mean, not every first responder can get, a spouse with epilepsy.
Yeah. So, they could only be so lucky.
Yeah. Exactly. So what do you recommend? What do you think, like, how could we eliminate that panic that you've maybe felt before? Or what is something that you feel like would just be helpful in this situation so that when a first responder does respond, that's what they do, a first responder responds. When a first responder arrives on scene, how can we, obviously we can't alleviate panic in a person totally, but how can we change kind of the perception? Or is there a misperception when people arrive on scene?
I think there's a combination of things that we could do better. Education is one of them, but the education is sometimes outdated. When I first started the academy for the fire academy, the information that we had on seizures was very limited, and this is in 2018. Sure. Now, and since I've met, since we've got married and stuff, information has changed again, and we just got married earlier this year. So, more information has come out. So I think it's just updating training, updating information. It's a broad scope to, understand, because there's so many different types of epilepsy out there. You just don't know what to do. But I think proper training is a huge, huge factor in it. So,
well, I like to use a different term. Yes, training. In law enforcement, I noticed, and for myself, when it came to me, and I'm dating myself back to 2006 here, but when I got out of the academy, yes, that academy was supposed to train me and prepare me to go out there and handle my job right away. And it did that to a sense, but you learn through more or less, not just training, but repetition.
Yeah.
Repetition of getting those same types of calls and getting comfortable with this, that, and the third. But when it comes to the medical side of it, when I'm getting those medical calls as a first responder, I think if we had an increase of exposure to seizure recognition. That's important too, because it's not just the amount of calls you get, but the more you're exposed to the different types of seizures, you can better handle, because again, until I get increased treatment through Jessica, you didn't know that there were multiple types of seizure. I mean, that's not something that's known. So, you get, I have plenty of calls I've had where, you get to that car versus wall or that driver who won't raise down the window, that's not responding, that's just staring off. You may think, this guy said this guy was weaving and things like that. Are they drunk? Intoxicated? And it does appear to be drunk. It does appear to be more or less under the influence of something, drugs or alcohol. And the more education and exposure you can give somebody, it kind of adds that extra option in their head of, could this be a medical issue? Maybe it's epilepsy, maybe it's this, maybe they're having a heart attack, maybe they have a diabetic episode, whatever the case may be. Or
they're stroking out or something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that if the exposure and the training is increased and updated to where that officer can show up on scene that, yes, it's midnight shift, right? Yes, a lot of people are out there drunk. But if I treat this from a broader brush of, is this a medical first? The idea of, or the evidence of, if they're under the influence of something, that'll come anyway. We got time for that. When that person, when the EMTs or you get them to the hospital, they'll let me know if that person, yes, they did have a seizure, but guess what? They've got double the legal limit of alcohol in their system. The arrest can always come later. You don't have to arrest somebody right now. You can treat them first. You can treat the person first. And then if the evidence comes about that, they had drugs, alcohol in their system, that paperwork can be done later. Yeah. You don't have to enforce now and be overly aggressive now.
And I think that's something that, especially in Chicago, what I've experienced over in my career, but what we've talked about as well, prior to this, is that departments have become so much more infused with EMS and police working together on scene to just manage a call. Because a call, nobody knows what they're responding to. Nobody knows what, a shooting's going to look like, a car accident's going to look like, a stroke victim, epilepsy. No two scenes, no two calls. They're never alike.
Yes.
Every epilepsy, every seizure call I've ever gone on, I've never had the same one twice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've had the same patient twice, but it's never been the same situation.
The time management can be extended. I mean, I've even, not to go into any depth. 19 years, I got a lot of stories, but I've even had it where I've had someone under the influence of a drug, or alcohol, and throughout the course of the arrest, they have a seizure. Yeah. So now you got to shift. Now you got to be like, oh, well, what's going on here? And it may not be like a massive seizure. It could be something just subtle, but now you have to, take that hat off and put the other hat on and treat this person. So again, you're talking about the updated training. It's not just a tool in the tool belt. It's just opening up that person's mind a little bit open-minded to, all right, what do I have here to properly treat that person?
Right.
And again, whatever, neglect or wrongdoing they did, it can be handled later.
Yeah. And I really appreciate the it can be handled later. The first thing is making sure this person is safe and okay. But also that it can be subtle, and recognizing that seizures look different and can be subtle. That's huge, because I think that's something that's that's a misconception, among society as a whole, really. Yeah. So what are some stories of, seizures that you've seen on the job, or have seen someone post dictal, on the... I know you guys have a ton. You're like,
I was going to say, well, I'll tell you what I just...
How long do you want this podcast episode to be?
So, I've mentioned to you many times, the seizure Sundays, because people going out Fridays and Saturday nights, and they're enjoying their summer.
That's why.
But I didn't know that until you had explained it to me. But on Sundays, we see an uptick in the city of seizures. And I remember just recently I got a call. She and I were on the phone. I was at the firehouse, and we're talking, and all of a sudden the tones go off, and we get, called out for a seizure. And she's like, "What's the call?" And I'm like, "It's EMS seizure. It's Sunday." Jokingly saying it, but we get on scene, and it's a younger patient, and they were out of it. They were already in their post-ictal state, and we'd had this patient before, but we'd never had them like this in their post-ictal state. And I was working with the patient, and the next thing I know, the patient kind of just sprawled out. And I took a hand to the face, and I came back home the next day, and I'm just looking at me like, did you get hit in the face? I was like, yes. When? I was like, I didn't. Yesterday at work by one of the guys. No, a patient.
Yeah.
But I was like, I didn't want to get into it yesterday, but
Right.
But it was a patient that we'd had many times before that is a regular, if you will, and they have epilepsy, but they've never been this, they've just been, very still in their post-ictal state. This time they were on another narcotic as well, and it just they reacted differently to it. And I was like, yeah, I got a black eye. I got a bruised nose and a black eye and a bruised ego. So,
Right, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But
Yeah. And I've heard so many stories like from patients who are like, I accidentally kicked a paramedic in the balls. Like,
Yeah.
like, and it's funny now because the paramedic knew,
Yeah.
paramedic was even joking about it. Like, oh my gosh, like post seizure, but I think getting hit in the face
Yeah.
is something that could be misunderstood.
right.
100%. Okay, so Duane, from your Rolodex.
Well, here's one, and this was one where again, it's about being able to recognize what you have in front of you when you're dealing with the same calls every day. Oftentimes, whether it's day or night, depending on the weekend or whatever,
Yeah.
we'll get that possible DUI call. That's what it's called in as, because the public doesn't know what they're looking at when they're seeing a car weaving from lane to lane. So we get one of those calls every now and again. So of course I spring the action because I want to try to catch up before anything bad happens. Then as I'm getting close to the area that the call was called out at, car versus wall. So that same car that was weaving now struck a wall. So of course now it's coming in as a DUI because that's what they're saying, DUI. And I get there and it was an older man, and I see a young child in the car because at this point they told me ahead of time there was a child in the car. And I get there and the guy looks over at me in like a blank stare really. And I said, sir, can you unlock the door because the car's still in drive? And he what could normally be perceived as he's refusing to unlock and open up his door because he's looking at me and can you open up the door? And as I'm staring at him a little longer, I realize that he's seeing me. He may be hearing me, but it's not connecting.
It's
something is off there. So obviously, I look down, I see the car still in drive. Then I know we have an issue because he's not just refusing. Because if he wanted to go, he wanted to be, resistive. Then he would have drove back off because the car was still drivable. But he's just sitting there, car up against the wall. So I recognize I need to get in there and I need to help this person, because something is a little off. Obviously, we have a young, what I found out later was a 5-year-old. So again, I had to go to a safe location, break the glass, get in the car. And then that's when I really got up close to realize, okay, this is a medical issue. Luckily for me, the paramedics had just got there like a couple of minutes afterwards. They were able to take over treatment, of him. And I got to the young boy, and the young boy, believe it or not, looked at me and said, hey, Dad just had another seizure, Wow. So his son, who found out was 5, was just like, yeah, Dad had another seizure. So the boy was calm throughout the whole process. He was calm throughout me breaking the glass. But instead of me, treating this as a normal DUI call, which I've had before, where now it's like, sir, you're being, resistive. You're not listening. You're not obeying orders. I was able to open up and go, okay, he's not obeying orders because he's under the influence. There's a medical aspect to it.
Right.
And like I said, I've had that same situation where I found out later on, yes, alcohol was involved, but that's okay. Let me treat this person first and get him in a position where his life is no more in danger till additional resources can come about. And
especially with a car versus a wall. I mean, your head trauma could be something, chest pains, severe circulation,
Yes, you always want to treat the person first.
Yeah.
And then any type of, illegal activity that led to it, that can be investigated and handled lately. Exactly. Right now, it's about the safety of the person, safety of young brand, scene safety, and
PSI scene safe.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, we had that. And then just real quick, I had another one where it wasn't involved in a vehicle, where I was at a large conference, thousands of people there. And me being in uniform there, I get called to that, hey, someone's having a seizure. Someone's having a seizure. And they're having what's called the massive grand mal seizure that people are accustomed to, where it's a lot of movement in the body. And I get there and there's people around them, the public's around, and, they're all saying, hey, make sure you put some in his mouth and make sure you do all these things. And I'm like, whoa, guys, hold on. Turn him on his back, his neck, turn him on his back. And I'm like, no, that is not what we do. Yeah. And I was calm, and that was another nurse showed up and everything. And it's like, hey, how about we just kind of leave him on his side, let any fluid in his mouth drain out, and keep him comfortable until additional paramedics can arrive. So, you use that calm nature further educates everybody on scene. Is everybody can't freak out. Someone has to be the calm one that everybody kind of diverts to.
Yeah. Wow. And that's huge. That's huge. And I think kind of leads to, like, because you guys have like your own personal seizure training. You're welcome. But that leads to, Jess, I want to hear, because you are certified to teach seizure safety and training to law enforcement.
Yep.
Which, is just like a hair flip.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
like
so
one of
dope.
those things. Yeah. Yep.
So tell us like what that looks like, how people can access it if they want it, in their community, and how you just came to be such a baller bitch.
Yes, I try. I do what I can. But yes, I am one of 20. Actually, it's probably more than 20 now. But initially in 2023, when this training was finally launched, after efforts from the Epilepsy Foundation in partnership with amazing consultant Sunny Slaughter, who is a trainer for the Department of Homeland Security and also a specialist with law enforcement and litigation. So she worked in partnership with EFA to create this specialized training for law enforcement, which can also be tweaked a little bit for other first responders and security agencies. And so it isn't just law enforcement. Initially, that's what it was created for, but we can tweak it. And I was one of 20 who were first trained in this training. And it initially starts out with like your typical what you would see in the seizure first aid training for the public, which is like, what is epilepsy, what is seizures? But when ears start to perk up when law enforcement, the training is being executed, is when you start talking about exactly what Duane said about the different types of seizures. And what do those look like? Because everybody thinks of the tonic-clonic that you see in the movies, right?
Which, by the way,
when
we first started dating and she was explaining to me the different types of seizures, that blew my mind.
Right, because nobody knows. And there's over 40 different seizure types. Obviously, don't go over all the 40 different seizure types. You go over like the balloon, but like even when we're talking about absence seizures versus tonic-clonic versus atonic, they are all so different and they can all show up in different ways. So that's the initial part that really starts to perk ears in the room when you're talking to a law enforcement community. But there's also conversational pieces when we go into like value proposition of like, why is this important? Because everybody wants to know what's in it for me, right? Like they think that's really important. And so we talk about how learning this information, more information about seizures and what's the proper way to respond and when is a good time to use a taser, teaching them about VNS and RNS and all of these things that they have no idea what it is. And talking to them about how not only is this going to be another tool in their duty belt to just be even better first responders, but also how it's going to connect you to the community because now you have more detailed information about a community of people who have 1 in 26 have epilepsy, which the prevalence is really high, but also building that trust with the community. And then, of course, there's always that piece of not only are you keeping the person with epilepsy safe, you're keeping yourself safe because we know post-ictal or even during the seizure, people can become violent or they can do whatever, so you're protecting the person, yourself, and then also you're protecting your department, right? Because we know that when negative things happen, there may be some type of reaction from that person who maybe the response wasn't correct, right? So we talk about value proposition, but then we also talk about the 3 R's of when it comes to police. So we know stay safe side is SFA for public, but the 3 R's are for law enforcement. And so really it's talking about teaching them how do you recognize, how do you take that split second, like Duane was saying about instead of going into this is a DUI call and this person is resisting arrest, how do we take a second to be like, whoa, like I remember from the training that I participated in that this person is showing maybe signs of an absence seizure, or and just taking that second to pause and really assess what's in front of you. So there's pieces of that in there. And we talk about the proper response. So all law enforcement receive de-escalation training. And so how do we differentiate between, utilizing those de-escalation techniques versus immediately going up 4 levels and then causing something that's negative, right? Yeah. When we went to the training in Atlanta, there was a chief there, and I forget what department he was from, but he talked about how he responded to a call of someone walking in the middle of the road, and they were kind of just wandering around, and they were having that type of seizure where, they're just walking around, they don't know where, they're not responsive, they're unconscious, and so instead of yelling at this person and coming at them and resisting arrest, he just made sure that person was safe because it was clear that they weren't there, right?
Right.
And it turns out that instead of that person being on drugs, they're actually having a seizure. And so he presented and talked about why it's so important for law enforcement to really understand that if there is a criminal aspect of the call, it can be dealt with later. Put your medical hat on and really handle that properly. And so that's what this training is all about, is like, how do we make law enforcement and other first responders even better, arming them with this information that is going to, just make them better and help them connect with the community in a different way. Because we know that the epilepsy community really has a mistrust. And we hear from Allison Nickel and others from legal defense all the time about the amount of calls that they get from people with epilepsy who have been mistreated or have been, arrested and taken to jail instead of going to a hospital. And it could be life-threatening. And so this training is a proactive way for law enforcement agencies and other agencies to really gain that information that's really going to be a game changer.
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely huge.
Yeah.
It's just so huge. And I really appreciate every way you framed that.
Yeah.
Because it's about elevating.
Right.
Elevating the care and really about building community.
Yeah.
Because it is terrifying to walk out into the world, be like, if I have a seizure, and it depends on what first responder I'm going to get.
Right.
You know? So if someone is listening right now, because I'm sure people are like, how do I get this in my community? Because currently it's not mandated.
Right.
Which is a little baffling.
Yeah.
And also another reason why people should look into the national plan and how they can connect and start, making noise with their officials about how to, because that's one of the things on, for the national plan is to get this mandated.
Yeah.
But right now it's voluntary.
Right. Yeah.
So
don't even get me started.
But that's where we're at right now. So that's what we're working with. What would you tell people who are like, okay, I want this in my community?
Right.
Whether they're law enforcement listening or first responder listening or a person with epilepsy or a caretaker, what is the course of action?
Yeah. So on epilepsy.com, you can actually just go to Google and type in Epilepsy Foundation Law Enforcement Training, and the website will pop up and you can read all about it. There's tons of detailed information about what it's all about. How do I connect with the Epilepsy Foundation to request it? But there is an email, so it's programs@efa.org. And if this is something that you want more information on or want to connect with your communities and get some support, you can email them and they will connect you with your local trainers, because there are more coming every 3 or 4 months. More people are being trained to actually execute this training. So, but that's the best way, is really to do that.
Awesome. Okay, and all of those links and email addresses will be included in the episode description.
Sweet. Yeah, perfect.
Well, you guys, I really appreciate this conversation. Just because I feel like, this is where we're at right now, where it's voluntary, right? It's voluntary to get this training. And I know we're all pushing for this to be mandatory, but this is what we have right now.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate everyone coming to the table. I feel like that's when you get everyone here, it's a great way to start or further the process of systemic change. And I'm just so appreciative that you guys are here, sitting here chatting about this on a Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will add, if I can add one thing
please
real
do.
quick.
Yeah.
So I did want to say that here in Illinois, when I came back from that training in Georgia, I immediately tried and did successfully connect with the academy in Springfield for Illinois State Police, and had a lot of conversation about the value proposition of this training and why this is important. Not only as a person with epilepsy, but also a police wife. And really, they talk a lot about finding that advocate within the police community, whether you go to public events and you talk to them about this training is free, this is this, and it's only going to help. The Illinois State Police was so amazing in recognizing the value of actually adding this into their quarterly emergency response training. And so it is actively being executed now at the academy for all sworn troopers. And it's also going to be added into the academy cadet training as well.
Awesome.
And so Illinois State Police have done it. Delaware State Police have implemented it as well. And so the value is there. Our agencies see it. And one thing I wanted to say, if there's any law enforcement individuals who are listening, we know that things are not easy. There's understaffing, there's stress. But even if just one person within your agency, attends a training or reaches out to EFA to say, how can I be upskilled to share this with other officers in my department, whatever that looks like for you for capacity wise, it's so worth it. And when you look at these major agencies who have implemented it and see the value, it's there. We just have to, figure out a way we can ebb and weave and come to you at however you need to receive this information.
Yeah, it sounds like a catering.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
We'll tailor it to your needs.
Exactly.
We'll make sure this gets out there.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, in the way that works for you. Because like you said, we recognize that law enforcement, first responders, everyone's spread a little thin.
Yeah.
Not trying to come at you, just saying hey, here's something to help.
Yeah.
I mean, how big is your response area that you respond to as a single trooper?
Oh my goodness. It depends. And, with manpower issues that a lot of agencies are facing, it can be anywhere between 10 to 20 miles. I mean, and then, you have backup, sometimes close, sometimes far. But what if that other person is busy? Yeah. Now it's expanded.
It's expanded.
And, the training that, it's kind of like one of those things when you're dealing with so much, we take on a lot of training because we have a large area to cover. And when you're dealing with so much training and then you get, I don't want to say complacent, but then you get into the annual trainings where, you leave that training, well, this is another day of this training, another year of this training. But when you take, as someone who's taken this training, I like to say it's the greatest thing that I didn't know I needed. You leave that training feeling educated, you feel refreshed. And it's those type of trainings that stick. It's those type of trainings when you get that next call, you know exactly what to do. You know exactly what you're looking at. It's not just that annual training. And like she says, if you just send one person to the training, you might even be able to send your whole agency right away. It might not be something, manpower this, you got chiefs and, administrators trying to figure out how they're going to do the regular training already. But if they can find a way to send that one person, that's the bridge in that gap that can report back and say, hey, I learned this, that, and the third. This is something that really, really, I would handle just other incidents, prior incidents, so much better if I'd have known this a long time ago. And it's that connection there that can hopefully resonate throughout the administration and the higher upper command. Okay, maybe next month we can send a couple of more. You're not might be able to do it all the time, but it can really build up. And again, it's really helped me because being someone that's worked patrol out of all my time on for 12 and a half years, we have an initial responsibility of scene safety. Then beyond scene safety, all right, taking care of this person initially. Well, this training puts time on your side, whether or not even if you're dealing with that person that's non-responsive to your commands or resistive or combative. This adds time on your side. This training, this knowledge that you have can help that person because without it, in my belief, some of these calls may not have gone negatively if they knew they had that time to reassess and be educated and handle it appropriately.
Can you expand on what you mean by it adds time?
Do you mind if I
Absolutely.
So from an EMS portion, from my side, from the EMS responding side, what I'm gathering from you is we yeah, you're having a moment that allows you to step back, take yourself out of it. Not everybody has epilepsy, but there are, narcotics, and there are
There's other reasons
other people have seizures
Yeah.
that if you're recognizing it from the you have the training to be able to recognize it. That means when I arrive on scene, because you're by yourself, I arrive on scene, you could be like, I think this person's having a seizure. My brain already knows, all right, let's get we've got rescue meds that we carry on, not the stuff you may use, but we have stuff that is we're using, and it's like now I'm in the I've already got half the problem solved. What's the other problem? Because that's all we do on scene is problem solve. It's putting a puzzle together. How did we get to this? Where did they come from?
And I have to add to it, because you just said when you got on scene. I don't need to wait till you get on scene. I'm probably going to be on scene 10 minutes prior. If I recognize something, if in my training, if this person is just kind of being out of it, I just let my dispatch know to let you guys know
coming in.
You're going to know even before you get there,
right?
That this combative person, and let's say they're being combative. Now my backup, not just the EMT, my backup, those troopers that are 10 minutes away, they don't have to come with their arrest gloves on and all this stuff. They know I can say, hey, I think this person they're being combative, but I think they're postictive, they're dealing with an epileptic episode. Yeah. Now they're coming with their medical hat on. So that communication is important. That communication happens because I was able to initially size up the scene, size up the person, and be able to get communications out to what they have. That way all the resources come ready.
And that's one of the beauties that I've seen from CFD and CPD is like, and we haven't worked with the state police much because, our response times are so fast in the city, is like they immediately like, hey, this is an EMS call. Let them handle it. We'll pick them up from the hospital. We'll ride with them in the ambulance. We'll deal with it later. Like we don't need to deal with this. Let's get some of these, patrol cars out of here. We just need 2, and let's get out. Let's utilize our resources better. Right. Okay? Because everybody's struggling with manpower these days. Yeah. Everybody's struggling with, having the resources to, protect and care for the city, or state.
And if that person does turn out to be did something they shouldn't have done, and they got to be held accountable, we're there. Once they, they become conscious again, once they do all these things again, that's what I mean by time on their side. If that person could be, we've dealt with some very violent, offenders out there. They're human. They still have epilepsy. They still need to be treated. Yeah. And then they can be, ran through the judicial process after the fact. But how we handle them keeps us from a negative liable standpoint as well. We don't, that's something that our bosses and our upper command would like to know. Hey, the confidence to know we're handling, yes, this person, they don't need to be treated like garbage. They need to be treated like someone that's, had a seizure first, and then they can be processed later.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And to that point, I think, at least for me as a person with epilepsy, knowing that the troopers are going through that training at the academy to recognize different types of seizures makes me feel safer. So if something happens to me while I'm driving or I'm out in the world, like it makes me feel more trustworthy that like no matter what happens on 294 highway, like the trooper is going to know different signs of like me having a seizure, right? And because I've heard so many stories, like even people that I work with who have crashed their car having a seizure, and immediately it's like, oh, you're on drugs. What are you taking? And and I'm going to take you to jail, whatever. But it's just, having that education like just makes such a difference.
Now, state police, I'm going to go ahead and throw my, cocky hat on here, but we're a state agency.
Bring it down.
And we are highly trained. We go through so much training and, because we deal with so much, and we've developed a reputation of being one of the best agencies in the United States of America, if not the world. And knowing that we have adapted this training and we can demonstrate this training, it resonates. It resonates beyond, it takes our reputation a step further into the communities because, again, I've had calls where I've dealt with just family members going to, amusement park, and they see how I show up, they see how I handle a call, and, they're going to tell that story about how that state trooper handled it. I've had I've had situations where I've backed up other agencies, I won't name any, and that call was not going well. That medical call wasn't going well. That family member felt like their voice wasn't being heard for their family member's medical need. And I've assisted. When I got there, I assisted. The situation got handled a little bit better. It got a little bit calmer. And again, there's that reputation of, well, what did you do? Now I can say, hey, well, I took this training. That's how I was able to recognize what the sister or the brother was saying. And been able to get that information to EMTs. And, things got a little bit calmer. Things ran a little bit smoother. And cooler heads prevailed, and the person was taken care of.
Yeah. I mean, so I just feel, all I hear is like what, I'm going to steal your term, Jess, is like just these these value props that just keep coming up, that like how, how proud you are to talk about the Illinois State Police, not just because of seizure training, obviously, but like other factors too. But this is just one other way that it's leading the country and the world. Which I think that's just like another way to say, hey, this is wanna like go for the gold medal, guys? Like, come on, do some seizure training.
Yeah, all I need is one of your officers. Come talk to me, have a conversation. Like it's there. The value's there.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we close out, what is the message that you guys feel like you would like to put out there into the world, into the community? That you think would be very helpful?
You can go first. I still got to think about it for a second.
I mean, granted, I knew this question was coming because I heard her practicing last night.
Okay.
But I mean, I think it's, as a Chicago firefighter, we are trained firemen, but we are also trained EMTs. Majority of our calls are medical calls. We're not going into fires every single day. We are dealing with the public every single day. And our job has changed and it's evolved. It's moved from, when my father was on the fire department, he was going to fires almost every single day in the 70s and 80s, to where we go to a fire maybe once or twice a month or something like that. So it's changed drastically, and we are more working with the people, the public. You call 911, you're going to get a fire truck, a fire engine or fire truck at your house with trained medical professionals, and then the ambulance will arrive afterwards. So it's evolved, and it's evolved because of training. And I think we go through the academy, and you get a lot of information thrown at you, and then you get out of the academy, and then you really learn what that information is and how to utilize it. I don't think anybody who spends their time in the academy and comes out knows anything. I've got almost 7 years on the job, and I still don't know anything about my job because it's always...
I wouldn't, proclaim that.
No, I mean, like, I'm still learning. I'm still learning every time I go on scene. There's something new. And the discussion, taking your time to have the discussion. We are very fortunate that when we come back from a call, we come back to the firehouse. We have this amazing area that we get together, sit around in the kitchen at the table, and we have we may be bullshitting and, talking shit about each other, but we also like, okay, that call was crazy. This was insane. Did you see the way, that guy did this, or that person did this, or the way the mom was handling that with their child, or whatever? And it's something that we can discuss right then and there. And then our department does it even bigger, and I know a lot of departments do this too, where they get their battalion together, especially after a major incident.
Right.
And it becomes a bigger conversation within a smaller group. And sometimes at very big situations, the whole department has the conversation. So it's out there but people just need to continue to talk and continue to communicate what their experiences are, and what they're seeing, and how we could have handled it differently, what we could have done better, where we could have improved. Not everything is going to go perfect. You can train. You could be the best trained individual in the world at your job, but when you get on scene, everything could go to shit.
Yep.
So fast.
Yep.
It's controlled chaos, and it's wonderful, and I think it's one of the things that we love about it. But you just have to be willing to be like, step back and go, okay, what do I remember from my training? What is this? What am I supposed to do? And, what is my role? And that's the biggest part. And if you have the proper training and you've taken the time to just talk about the training or review the training, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. So kind of just like continued
communication, open communication about it, because we can talk about the scenes. I have the ability. You're a single patrolman. You may have somebody riding in your car every once in a while. A partner here. Never. All right, lone wolf.
Yeah, that's how we roll.
But I got 5 guys in my rig.
Oh, okay.
I got a team of guys. So I got the ability to have that conference. After a call, where we
meet up for lunch every once in a while.
We can't miss lunch.
Yeah,
right.
Of course.
But
Duane.
As I gather my thoughts here, I like to say reputation breeds respect, even when it comes to someone and strangers. And that is that law enforcement officer is both in one. What I mean by that is, in a climate where law enforcement is loved and hated, depending on where you go, who you're talking to, having training like this is a resource that connects with the public, connects with law enforcement, connects with everyone. Like I say, when you get that 911 call, that person, whether they love or hate you, they need you. Mm-hmm. They need your help. And how you handle that call, remember, you don't know what you have. They know what they have. They're there. Mm-hmm. So the training that you bring to that call can really help that combative person, that person that that's not even speaking. That family member could have no training. They could be a long distance relative, but they need your help. Mm-hmm. And the reputation that you bring, well, this is a state trooper. This guy knows what he's doing. He must know what he's doing. Well, I better know what I'm doing. I better not just show up all wily coyote. I better handle that situation appropriately and educate them as we go along, again, until resources show up. And that one experience that person has, that individual has, they're going to talk about that. They're going to talk about that in their communities. They're going to talk about that back at home, as well as I might be on scene with other agencies. And they're watching me. Trust me, it happens a lot.
Yeah.
They're watching how
Absolutely.
I'm handling a situation, what I'm doing. They could be that second year trooper, and I'm a 19-year trooper. What is he doing? And guess what? They're going to go back and tell their chief, or I can talk to them later on in a debrief saying, hey, well, the Illinois State Police received this additional epilepsy training. That's why I was able to identify what I was looking at. That is the core value of this training that department that might not have it, might not know how they can swing it in their department. Again, send somebody, get it out there, watch a video, do a Zoom, get this training because it can help.
Oh, it can definitely help. The more training out there, and I hope this national plan comes into effect, because the resources need, like you said, there's over 40 different types of seizures. Amazing. And then you break that into the subsets of seizures, and you're talking about 400 styles of different seizures that, you have no idea. You have no idea. And when we get on scene, we don't deal with people on the best day of their lives.
Right.
We're not there. You don't call the fire department or the police department because you're having a birthday party and you want them to come hang out with you.
Right.
You're calling them.
Depends.
Yeah. Well,
What kind of birthday party you want? You know what I'm saying?
or bachelorette party.
Wow. Okay. Here we go.
We're dealing with public mostly on the worst days of their lives, and they're looking to us to be the ones in the know, to help them, and you got to step up. You got to bring it. You got to wear that hat. You got to wear that helmet. You got to do the job. And if you don't have the proper tools in your utility belt, you can't do the job. You're making the scene worse than you are by helping. And
yeah, and I think what really struck me too is that both of you had mentioned, how this conversation came to be was because Jess and I were talking and saying, oh yeah, both of you had said to each of us privately how much you had learned about epilepsy by being with us. But then in addition to that, Duane, you had mentioned that the training was the thing you didn't know you needed, right? So even though you have a spouse with epilepsy, you were still like, you still walked out of that being like, I needed this and I even learned more. And I think it's just a way to continue to be an expert in something that almost has no expertise because it is such a myriad of ways it can manifest. But I just am so amazed at the power of that this training can have for people right now, and for not just for victims, but for, law enforcement, first responders. And that I think that's just such an amazing testament to it.
And if I can add on, it's
Please.
free. It's free.
Yeah.
Doesn't cost anything.
Everybody likes free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every department likes
So
free.
like, how
Absolutely.
could you pass it up? 75 minutes free. And now you're an even better first responder.
So I got to do continuous education. Can I get that towards the recertification of my
Good question.
my EMT license?
That's probably on the website. I don't know if there is or there isn't. That's a great question.
Just saying, because
Yeah.
that's
You got to be that guy.
you know what?
Can this go towards the other thing?
For all I know,
Hey,
it might. I don't know.
it's one of those things. I think I'm probably right after this, I'll be looking it up myself.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with incentives.
Yeah.
That can, hey, maybe spark that, administrative, that upper command to say, hey, we not only are we going to make this happen, but we're going to get something out of it.
Right.
We're going to get those credit hours. So, I mean, I don't know if it is or it isn't, but again, everybody's winning.
Everybody, well, yeah. You walk, like you said, you walked out of there and you knew you didn't even know you needed it.
Yeah.
That's a win. I mean, how many other trainings have you had like that? And
Not many.
you're right. Right.
Many. Well, you're just going through the motions, but this isn't emotion. This is a refreshing, awesome amount of knowledge that, wow, this is different than that first seizure I just saw, So again, now I can do my job better. And again, it's going to save lives.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I hope everyone listening knows that there are resources. You can reach out if you have more questions. But that's really the way only we're going to make change right now, is by coming together as a community and not just having these conversations, but taking actionable steps like getting seizure training and working towards the national plan. So
100%.
I really appreciate you guys being here. You kind of have to be here. You have a choice.
I don't know if you know this, but I had to be here too.
Yeah. You got to. Are you her chauffeur too?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You kidding me?
Yeah.
Well, thanks you guys so much. That's great.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was pretty awesome.